Red dots have become extremely popular on every type of gun, including carry guns. And today that's what I want to focus on. Is running a dot on your carry gun really worth it? And so I want to go through the pros and cons. And at the end of the video, I'll give you my opinion whether I think it's actually a good idea to run these on your concealed carry. Now, I have a lot of reviews here, everything from rifles and pistols to concealed carry and World War II guns. Check out some of the playlists and other videos I have right here. And if you like what I do, consider subscribing. Let's go and get into it. Now, I want to talk about what's good on the red dot first. And I think to start, we need to talk about the irons because there's got to be a reason that we want something in addition to our irons. There's got to be some kind of deficiency in using our standard irons that gives us a reason to even invest in one of these in the first place. And I think the biggest thing is the ease of use. So your irons, you're focused on the front sight. It's pretty much going to be level across the top with your rear sight, and you're going to have equal amount of space or air in the rear sight on each side. As long as your trigger pull is good, that front sight is what you're focused on, you pull that trigger straight back to the rear, and that's how you get really good shots. Now in self-defense, this may or may not always work out like that. You know, if you have one person that's 1 or 2 or 3 feet away from you, a lot of people teach to point and shoot, point and shoot. And that is, I think, not irresponsible at all, because depending upon the situation, these things happen very quickly, and the distance, that may be reasonable as well. So what I try to do to judge myself on how well I'm shooting a concealed carry gun specifically, I never really expect myself to be able to put shots on the same hole over, even if it's on steel, same hole over and over and over and over. But if I'm on a 6-inch plate or an 8-inch plate and I got all of my shots consistently in one area, I may have to make some adjustments from there, but I know that I'm good. If I have shots on that same plate that are going from top left to bottom right to center, just all spread out, now I'm like, okay, there's something I'm not doing right here with this gun, and I need to get better before I ever decide to carry it. I want consistency on that plate. I don't need the shots in the same hole over and over and over, or the same spot on steel, but I need to have that consistency, make minor adjustments if needed, and then I'm good to go. But as a newer shooter, or maybe even in a self-defense situation, that can be a lot to think about. So with a red dot, we put the dot on the target, and one crucial thing about this is when we're using irons, that front sight is what we're focused on, meaning the target is a little bit out of focus, and depending upon the distance, we may be covering that target a little bit too much. But if I put that dot on the target, I'm focused on the target, and the dot is there. I put the dot where I want it, and I make sure my trigger pull is good, and boom. It's so much easier, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So I used to kind of think, man, you need to learn irons before you learn a dot, but if using a dot to you is easier to pick up on and, get better at pistol shooting, then go for it, because that's one thing you'll find. Using a dot is so much easier and in a lot of cases even more consistent sometimes than using irons. Don't get me wrong, I think everybody should learn how to use their iron sights, whether it's a pistol or a rifle, but at the same time, red dot is much easier to use, and that's one of the biggest pros. Also, low light. Now, depending upon your situation, maybe you're working late at night, maybe you're in a sketchy area, maybe you're dropping off bank deposits late at night. Whatever the case may be, having a red dot works really good at night as well. Also, dependent upon your eyes. Irons can become harder to see as your eyes start to age, and so having the ability to have that red dot or green dot is very crucial, because now you can pick up that dot much easier than you can trying to line your irons up. Green dots, by the way, with my eyes specifically, work much better than red dots. I get more bursting effect with a red dot than I do a green dot, and it's just easier for me to see the green. I'm not colorblind or anything, but I do have astigmatism, and that red, as soon as I go up over like level 5, it just starts to really burst, and I'm not a huge fan of that, so I normally have to keep mine down even a little bit lower than what this one's running at. Yeah, right about there, and it does a really good job for me. So that's one thing you want to make sure, and most of them are like this, but a couple of things you want to make sure with your red dot is that you have physical buttons on the outside. You can adjust the brightness of the optic. Some of them will auto adjust to the light that you are, the ambient light around you. But you also want to have one that has a top or a side loading battery, because you do not want to have to take this thing off in order to just do a battery swap, because that sucks. I would never buy one of those ever again. So this new Romeo X from SIG, they changed that up. They put the battery compartment on the side. Much better system than what they had before. Now, another thing you want to consider is having the ability to be able to co-witness with your irons. You don't want to depend on just a dot. Now, 2032 batteries, which is what a lot of these optics take, they last a really long time. And when you get one that's motion activated, so it turns on whenever it feels any kind of motion, those are really the best way to go. Holosun does a really good job. SIG does a good job. They all call it something different, whether it's shake awake or motion activated. That's what I would suggest. Unless you're going with a really budget optic, then some of those won't have them. But if you're going with a mid or higher grade, you definitely want to have some kind of shake away option, because it's going to conserve your battery life. But you want to be able to use those irons in case that dot goes down, because those batteries don't last forever. So the Romeo X specifically, and a lot of other manufacturers do this, actually has it notched out here in the rear. So that allows me to get a perfect co-witness with my front sight. In case anything happens, I now have those backups. Now, where you put that front sight, or where you put that dot in relation to the front sight, is going to be up to you. You can have a true co-witness or a lower 1/3 co-witness, and that's how I like to run it. So I like to keep my dot up just over the top, maybe a little bit over the top of that front dot or front sight post. And then that way, if I drop my front sight post and I'm level in the rear with my rear sight here, I don't have that front dot covering my front sight. I like to have my front sight up just a little bit higher than my front post. So with better visibility, faster target acquisition, and much easier to learn on with something like a red dot compared to irons, what are the cons? Well, the first thing you got to consider is cost. You can get really, really cheap optics for like 70, 80 bucks. You're going to be wasting your money. At a bare minimum, $150 to $200 optics, that's like your mid-range, and I wouldn't go any cheaper than that. And then you have the higher range. You have your Holosuns, your Trijicons, your Romeo X, Aimpoint. There's so many really good ones out there, and I'm not going to go too much into that, but it is an additional cost. And like I said, a lot of the good ones are not cheap. The other thing is additional weight. This isn't as much of a concern as like a competition gun or a home defense gun, full-size pistol, anything like that. But on a carry gun, if it adds 3 or 4 ounces to your carry gun that's already, 20 ounces or 23 ounces fully loaded, 24 ounces, whatever, you may notice that inside the waistband, right? As far as, oh man, this does add a considerable amount of weight, because all those dimensions, including weight, grip, length, all of that, does make a difference, especially inside the waistband. Another thing to consider is your holster of choice now may not work. So if you don't have one that's cut for an optic, you may have to switch up. I use Tolster Oath holsters because they're cut for the optics. Any optic, they still have the same great features I've talked about before. I'll make sure I link maybe a video or two so you can check those holsters out. We have them discounted through our channel and everything else. They're a really good option. But that's something you want to consider, is that you need a holster that will accommodate that optic as well. Another thing to consider is, unless you have an enclosed optic, or a closed emitter, dust, water, things like that can get on the lens. And most of them with the open emitter style, they're going to get dirty and stuff. So you just got to, make sure that you keep them clean, and be aware, even though a lot of them will have anti-fogging and all that kind of stuff, it still can be an issue depending upon the circumstances. And then making sure that you're torquing these things down specifically to what the manufacturer says is super important. You don't want to have to remove this thing off of here if you can help it, okay? And so making sure you follow those steps, pretty simple. Another thing you got to consider is the footprint. Not every optic works for every single type of gun. You may be able to get adapter plates, or whatever the case may be. You can probably make it work, but you just want to verify when you get your carry gun, you have a holster that will accommodate it, and it will work with the optic that you want to run. So just additional things to think about. Of course, there's a chance of a battery going down and stuff like that. But if you kind of use the tips that I talked about in this video, these things are fantastic, and I definitely recommend at least going with an optic ready version of your carry gun. That way down the line, if you want to add the optic, it's so easy to do that as long as you pick the right one. And there really is clear advantages to having this on your carry gun. Love to hear your opinion of this down below. If you like what we do, consider joining us on Patreon, or you can join us on YouTube and never have to leave the site. Some pretty cool perks and stuff like that for all of our members. Big thanks to all of you. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.